This was the SEC's biggest mistake. What I'm talking about is suing Ripple. But that's all behind us because they sued them years ago. What was their second biggest mistake? Well, that one, ladies and gentlemen, just happened. It was when the SEC filed for an interlocutory appeal in the Ripple versus SEC lawsuit. Take a look at this. 𝗕𝗓𝗪𝗀𝗀 shared this over on Twitter. Filing for interlocutory appeal was a huge strategic blunder for the SEC. Win or lose, it fundamentally misunderstands the ruling. The judge did not rule that sales over exchanges can't be investment contracts. She only ruled the SEC failed to meet its burden of proof that a reasonable retail investor would believe they were relying on Ripple's efforts for profits. The SEC relied on cherry-picked statements from Ripple and select employees, but failed to produce evidence of the reach. The SEC didn't produce evidence of a single XRP holder who said he was relying on Ripple to increase the price of XRP. It tried to use expert testimony, but that testimony was excluded. The SEC didn't try to rebut John Deaton's affidavits from the XRP community. So why is the interlocutory appeal a huge strategic blunder for the SEC? Well, normally, a party appealing a ruling has the chance to interpret the ruling in a way that is helpful to it. And the court that issued the ruling doesn't get a chance to explain or clarify. But now, whether the judge certifies the interlocutory appeal or refuses to, and again, we are a couple weeks later since this came out, you've got the result, and the judge refused it, and it was way worse than was expected at that point. And before I go even deeper into all that, make sure you go ahead and press that like button on this video. Let's try to get to 700 likes. If we do that, I'll jump out my window. Not sure why I said that. I'll take that back. Anyway, she will have a chance to clarify her ruling, right? Which she did in hindsight. She will make it very clear that her decision was only that the SEC utterly failed to meet its burden of proof. One important thing non-lawyers might know, but not always remember or appreciate, is the general rule that no new evidence can be made on an appeal. So when you're trying to get back on a decision from the judge, you cannot present new evidence. It's just, with whatever you've got, reconsider. And no new legal arguments can be made on appeal either. The SEC is stuck with the record and will have scant evidence to point to an appeal or to point on appeal about reasonable retail purchasers. What this means is that when the case does get to the Second Circuit on appeal, the Second Circuit might even be inclined to agree with the SEC's underlying theory of the case, but it will be very clear that the judge's ruling was based on the undisputed factual record, which shows a glaring lack of evidence from the SEC about the understandings of the retail investors it was supposed to care about, but always sought to minimize and found itself adverse to throughout litigation. As the plaintiff, the SEC loses on a tie, it has to show it was more likely than not that a reasonable retail XRP purchaser was aware of Ripple and relied on Ripple's efforts for profits, or it loses. Deaton's affidavits by XRP holders, to the contrary, were answered by the SEC with nothing, and nothing is what the SEC is stuck with on appeal. Now, why am I showing this to you? I want to give you guys a lot of context here. Clayton said, James, if the judge denies this appeal, does the SEC have the option to appeal it after the fact to the appellate courts? David Schwartz, the CTO at Ripple, said yes. A party that loses on any claim or issue in their suit is entitled to appeal any adverse rulings at the conclusion of the suit, so when it's over. The SEC is asking for permission to appeal here because the suit is not completely over yet for any party. You can see now why there would be a rule like this. There are lots of little rulings all through a court case, and an appeal typically takes at least a year. If each ruling were appealed by the losing side, as it happened, you'd either have to pause the original case for a year every single time a party, disagreed with something and had to appeal, making it basically take forever, or you'd have lots of overlapping appeals both sides would have to deal with as the actual case is still going. So we encourage either or both sides to appeal all adverse rulings at the conclusion of the case, so when everything is over. This is the normal rule, and then all appeals can be handled at one time. But there's an exception for unusual cases, and the SEC is arguing that this is one of those unusual cases where an exception should be made, and the regular proceedings should stop until the appeal is complete. Ripple is arguing there should be no exception here, and Brad and Chris are arguing that even if the courts grant the SEC the right to appeal, the case should still continue on, and the appeal should run in parallel to not make this drag out any longer. The reason I'm showing you this is for you guys to understand what type of position we are currently in. Wait. Why in the world am I blocked by 𝗓𝗓𝗪𝗏? What? What did I do wrong? What? Okay, I guess it's just another account because it doesn't seem to have any following. Why did this guy block me? Anyway, I wanted to read the conversation, but I noticed I could only read half. So let me show you. This is from 20 hours ago. John Reed Stark said something quite interesting. The collective delusion of the cryptoverse is not just mind-boggling, it's also just flat-out insulting to anyone with more than one brain cell. The jury will instantaneously see through this nonsensical defense strategy for what it is, an ironic wholesale grift continuum. And that is with regards to what Sam Bankman-Fried spent money on. $100 million naming rights to his stadium. $25 million Super Bowl ad. $55 million for Tom Brady's, 20 hours. $16 million to the Kevin O'Leary guy. $10 million for Larry David's time. $300 million luxury real estate, $80 million to politicians, $30 million for private jets. 𝗓𝗓𝗪𝗏, who again blocked me, so screw you, said, still waiting on your comment, John, about the recent Ripple case ruling and the SEC interlocutory appeal request. What are the SEC's options moving forward, all right? And I wanted to quickly give you guys that basis of what we just read, understanding that the SEC brought themselves into a really shitty situation and then made it worse because now the judge clarified basically everything with regards to how it came to the conclusion, so that it's going to be harder for the SEC to appeal in the future. But John Reed Stark has a little, memoir here that's stretching a little ways. And Ripple's legal counsel also responded. Let's quickly see. Happy to address the recent Ripple-related order. 𝗓𝗓𝗪𝗏, my friend. Judge Therez's order. And by the way, I've been in conversations with John Reed Stark multiple times, and we have never agreed on something, which is funny. Whenever we go into a Twitter space, I already know we're going to disagree. Happy to address. Judge Therez's order, denying the SEC the opportunity for an interlocutory appeal, has also decreed that her previous summary judgment decision should not be cited as precedent. Thus, while this could be a Pyrrhic victory at best for the XP team, because the SEC will still undoubtedly appeal the decision after the trial, and I believe have a good chance of winning, Judge Therez has specifically deemed the decision as not precedent for the rest of the cryptoverse. Because what she basically said, if you wanted to know, is that whatever happened in this case is for these specific circumstances. So, by definition, a exchange transaction with basically a anonymous bid and ask is not per se not a security transfer. It depends on the totality of circumstances, which I think is fair. Incidentally, my hat still goes off to John Deaton and the XP team for calling out the SEC for their bizarro world of unilateral lawmaking from a podium, like the SEC shamelessly does with no action letters, interpretive releases, and settled consented administrative orders. Though I remain convinced that these side arguments, while important and creative defense strategies, remain a red herring. Deaton also sheds sunlight on Hinman's potential misconduct, which can create legitimate conflicts of interest. Along these lines, I am sick and tired of attorneys who leave their law firms, go to the SEC for 2 to 3 years, and then return right back to their original law firms, now with 10 additional millions of dollars in their pockets because of what they did at the SEC, like Hinman. It is only human that during their tenure, those lawyers will not want to rock the boat where their future resides or risk financial detriment by ticking off their future colleagues. Again, to get understanding here, we're talking about the SEC's corrupt nature and bias, because let's say you're working for a law firm and you go work at the SEC. You're not going to do anything that the law firm does not like. You're not going to go against them if you're planning to go back there in the next 2 or so years. So if you've got partners or you had partners, you're going to try appeal to them still, appease them, right? Which by definition is garbage for this entity. I also applaud the Deaton team for uncovering the dirty little secret that the SEC staffers never get enough credit for bringing through microcap fraud, penny stock fraud, and other cases that are super critical but typically don't garner headlines and thereby don't earn promotions. But having said the above, there is no denying the judge's view that her Ripple decision is not worthy of citation as president on the issue of whether tokens are securities. The judge is quite explicit about this notion in her order, stating blazingly. And then it's mostly just what I said before. It's all about the specific circumstances. To me, any lawyer who cites the judge's decision for the general proposition that a token is not a security risks an ethical charge for violating a lawyer's duty of candor. Why? Because it's an ethical violation to cite as precedent a decision where the deciding judge has explicitly designated that decision as having no presidential value, except under very limited circumstances where the facts are exactly the same. And our guys at Ripple, the legal team over at Ripple, said, agree to disagree on that legal impact of judge's ruling. But you also seem to be saying that XRP uniquely stands as the only digital asset other than Bitcoin with judicial clarity as a non-security. There we are on the same page. Those are some of the most recent discussions going on, but there's two additional parts. One is the fight between the SEC and Elon Musk right now, where Elon Musk is also saying the SEC is going to be taken down. Second of all is the SEC brief against Coinbase. The Ripple's legal team said there's so much wrong with the SEC's brief in the Coinbase case. I don't know where to begin. Let's start with the SEC's claiming, without citation or support, that digital assets have no innate or inherent value, while collectible baseball cards do. And then there we go. There, I'd like to refer back to this. Gary Gensler should have been subpoenaed already. Congressman Warren Davidson breaks down the next move against the SEC chair, Gary Gensler, and it's all in anticipation of this right here. In the Ripple case, before we go to trial, basically, there's one specific thing that I think is interesting. Prior to the final pre-trial conference, counsel for both parties, the SEC and Ripple, will have to discuss in person for at least 1 hour to discuss settlement. And then I've got this article for you. The SEC will drop all charges against Ripple according to this specific VC. Now, I don't care about this VC at all. I've never heard of the guy, so I don't really hold his opinion as the key to it all. But I will say that right now we've come to a point where the criticism of the SEC's actions, the controversy is so ridiculously high that I think if this continues on and Ripple and the guys really get to spill all the beans that they've been gathering for a while, that have not been able to be thrown up because we've not entered that phase just quite yet, that things are finally going to have to spiral out of control. Because really, it reads too much like a movie. It's too crazy what's happening here. And in this video, we've not even covered the whole Ethereum debacle. So my thoughts here are, if we really continue on, guys, it's going to be a movie. It's going to be that crazy. But I expect some major headlines with just fraud, scandalous, the SEC linked everywhere. I think a lot of people will get fired. I mean, if the government shuts down, a lot of people will get fired anyway. But I think even people that left the SEC will still get backtracked. And it's going to be one of the biggest scandals of our century in terms of a government agency. I mean, already in Congress and whatever in the U.S. political system, there's a lot of these insider traders and fraudsters, or people who have some very significant bias in making decisions. I mean, take a look at the lobbying system. At the end of the day, it's all just politics for money, right? But it's not really being talked about as much when it comes to the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. But here, because of this one specific battle they took with Ripple, this whole multi-billion-dollar fraud industry might actually be uncovered. And the funniest part is, it's all their own fault. And I think, right, if they're being smart about it, they can still withdraw against this whole trial debacle with Ripple and still save a lot of face if they're smart. Because they've been embarrassing themselves time and time again. Right now, the judge again had to clarify some parts about just how stupid the SEC's reasonings are. Yet they still keep doubling down, doubling down, doubling down. When is it enough? When is it going to be uncovered? We do not know, but we're getting closer and closer to it. I just wanted to quickly give you guys an update on that, how crazy these things are. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you press the like button. And let me know down below if you also think this is just insane.